the early spring of 71, a new sovereign state was carved out of the Indian subcontinent on accounts of language, tradition, and inhumane oppression by the Pakistani army. The people of Bangladesh, with the help of India, won their independence. A staunch Bengali nationalist, Mujibur Rahman, led the movement for autonomy and eventually ascended to be the first president of the newly formed Islamic Republic. Some people were anxious about peace and stability, but most were hopeful and optimistic about a free future. Following his key role in the War of Independence, Mujib gained immense popularity. His traits of wit and friendship made him very likable. He was even referred to as Bangabandhu, friend of Bengal. However, this golden period was very short-lived, quickly overshadowed by charges of nepotism and corruption. Critics pointed out that the government struggled to manage the economy, with food shortages and uncontrollable inflation cited as evidences of corruption. Mujib's son, Sheikh Kamal, was a key figure in the Awami League student wing, wielding significant administrative influence. This did not sit well with the common people. The fact that a police force loyal to the Mujib's, Jatiya Rakhi Bahini, was created was heavily criticized and seen as a tool of his increasingly unpopular regime. The Bangladesh story was not unfolding as Mujib had envisioned. The insurgencies and allegations of corruption gave well-willed individuals the opportunity to take dreadful action. Despite warnings from India, the US and Canada, Mujib ignored all calls and continued to live an ordinary life with very minimal security. In the early years of 15th August 1975, hell broke loose. Mujib, along with his family members, was killed in his own house. The death of Mujib marked a significant turning point. The events that followed would largely be shaped by the rule of the first president. Zia-ur-Rahman, a key military figure who held the position of Chief of Army during assassination, went on to become the president and form the Bangladesh Nationalist Party. However, as is often the case with power in Bangladesh, he himself was assassinated in an attempted coup on May 30, 1981. The nation then witnessed the tyranny and dictatorship of another autocrat, Arshad. It was only after the political struggle of Hasina and Khalida, the daughters of Mujib and Zia, that parliamentary elections were held, leading to a sense of stability being established. But it was all that was there, a sense. The reality was starkly different. Post-dethroning Arshad, Khalida Zia came into power as the Prime Minister. Her first term was marked by optimism and relief before the unrest set foot again. During her tenure, the rise of militant Islamic outfits like Harkat-ul-Jihadi al-Islam, Huji for short, was significant. It was aided and helped by notable ministers including members of her own regime. There were serious charges against the State Minister for Home Affairs, Lutfuzzman Babur, who was later convicted and sentenced to death in 2018. Although one of the most horrifying attacks were carried out on an Awami League rally, it targeted the top rival of Khalida, Sheikh Hasina. The grenade attack killed 24 people on record, with more than 200 injured, and Sheikh Hasina escaping just narrowly. Such incidents led to the unpopularity of Khalida's regime, and she was eventually replaced by Hasina in 96. Upon taking office in 96, Hasina made significant efforts for peace in the region. One of the bold and arguably good decisions of her cabinet was to sign the Chittagong Hill Tract Peace Accord. By this treaty, the people of the area of Chittagong Hill Tract got greater autonomy and resolved long-standing mistrust between the subjects and its regime. Moreover, her regime was marked by formation of industries, with greater emphasis on textile segment. Her rule was attributed to have made efforts in fields of art, sciences, and culture. But due to anti-incumbency and general experimental mood of the nation, she went on to lose the 2001 general elections. The to and fro between Hasina and Khalida finally stopped after 2006, post which Hasina led the country until August of 2024, when she was forced to succumb to the bloody and violent protests and flee her country she had served for most of her adult life. In 2022, small-scale riots and protests erupted across the nation in response to soaring commodity prices that was largely driven by the Ukraine-Russia war. Though these early demonstrations subsided, they were soon followed by a massive uprising, this time led by the academic class. The High Court's decision to reinstate the quota system, which aimed to provide relief to marginalized groups, including disabled and veterans, was met with optimism by the government. However, this did not sit well with the students. Angered by decision, they organized large-scale protests targeting the nation's infrastructure and inflicting significant economic damage. Seizing the opportunity, anti-establishment insurgents infiltrated the movement, transforming what began as a student protest into organized mob violence. Notably, this widespread unrest was triggered by a decision not even passed by the government, raising suspicion that the turmoil was, at least in parts, a manufactured crisis. In a haste, the Hasina government reversed the High Court decision and put in place a 93% merit-based system. The 93% open category seats represented the most extensive merit-based opportunities in Bangladesh's history, a remarkable leap by any measure. Yet this unprecedented concession failed to calm down the protesters. Several factors contributed to this continued unrest. A. Government's response. The government's heavy-handed approach, relying on force, fostered deep mistrust between the state and its people. But from a psychological point of view, a key factor was that of aspirations. In the digital age, where the internet exposes the masses to luxury and wealth, a growing sense of aspiration has taken root. When people perceive that such opportunities are being stripped away from them, dissatisfaction quickly turns into anger, and in rare, tragic instances, violence on such massive scale. To curb the spread of these violent protests, the government imposed a nationwide ban on social media platforms and enclosed educational institutions. A shoot-at-sight order was issued, and it indeed appeared that Bangladesh was descending into a state of anarchy. By August 2nd, the death toll had reached 200, with more than 11,000 people getting injured. On the 3rd of August, the Prime Minister called for peace talks and negotiation with the protesters, but these were swiftly rejected by the Central Coordinator, Nahid Islam, who stated, and we quote, "There is no dialogue with bullets and terrorism," unquote. The following day, a long march to the Prime Minister's residence was organized. The protesters presented this as a civil disobedience movement, demanding the resignation of what they perceived to be an autocratic and evil regime. Under pressure from the marching citizens and the military, Hasina finally relinquished power and fled to India. This marked her second asylum in India, the first being after 1975 following the death of her father Mujibur Rahman. Causations of this event. Before the collapse, Hasina's regime was heavily praised by the global media and institutions alike. They were referred to as the emerging tigers. It seemed everything was hunky-dory with the Bangladeshi saga. The economic indicators also pointed towards continuous moderate growth. The only foreseeable issue was with the depreciating exchange rate of Taka, but that was, and logically so, attributed to the global conflicts that led to the hindrance in supply chain. But there was more to it than what caught the eye. In a growing and manufacturing-based economy, such as Bangladesh itself, durable consumer goods indicators often convey the trend of retail money. In simple terms, sales of commodities like bikes and television will always be upwards in a country like Bangladesh. But the motorcycle sector saw a 21% decrease in sales and the television market remains stagnant. That was when dealers issued offers that enabled people to buy TVs at as little as 50 taka a day. That is nearly half a dollar or 35 rupees per day. In the geopolitical landscape, every player has its own interests. The powerful ones have the means to accomplish their desires, while the weaker ones must compromise and settle for whatever the heavyweight ally chooses. Bangladesh was no different. The Americans had their own agenda, a desire to keep a growing economy near China under their check, and to curb the increasing trade relationship between China and Bangladesh, which had the potential to develop into a military partnership. Direct allegations were made by the former Prime Minister of Bangladesh, who claimed if she had allowed a US military base on St. Martin Islands, none of the subsequent issues would have occurred. While these allegations were officially denied by the US, we know how much such denials often mean. Further evidences can be found in a report published by the US Naval Institute, which discusses the strategic depth of having a US naval presence in the Bay of Bengal. The report argues the logistical operations and enforcing naval blockades would be easier with the assistance of the Bangladeshi Navy. But it's not just the US that has a stake in Bangladesh. China also has vested interest in maintaining its trade relationship with the country. Bangladesh has been a significant importer of Chinese military hardware, with nearly 70% of all outsourced military equipments being sourced from China post-2017. The China-Bangladesh relationship was smooth until China rejected a $5 billion loan. The reasons behind this rejection are subject to much debate, and we lack concrete information to discuss it fully. However, China's interests in Bangladesh are clear, driven by two main factors. A. Bangladesh's proximity to India, and B. the ongoing trade relationship that could eventually lead to some form of debt dependency. Amidst the power games of the influential, the sufferings of ordinary people is often reduced to mere statistics, their sorrow confined to debates and discussions. The plight of the minority community in Bangladesh is no different. Any protest, regardless of its cause, frequently culminates into violence against them. They become easy targets for radicals, the government, and in this unfortunate case, even the nation from which they sought help. Sickening opportunists from around the world denied these communities the basic right to express their grief, dismissing the horrors faced by the Bangladeshi minorities, particularly the Hindus, as isolated incidents. Some ignored these atrocities because they weren't deemed significant enough, while others went as far as justifying their attacks. The account of such targeted violence are countless. In one instance, members of Jamaat-e-Islami blocked the roads leading to the homes of 45 Hindu families, telling them that they would be allowed to use the passage only if they converted to Islam. As tragic as this event was, it wasn't even the worst that they faced. Gut-wrenching scenes of violence unfolded in Bangladesh post-revolution, with bodies hanging, women being raped, and children being forcefully converted. These atrocities did not spare even the homes of prominent Hindu celebrities, such as Rahul Ananda, who had supported the protests himself. The mob set his house ablaze, marking yet another dark chapter in this harrowing saga. The tragic reality is that the voices of the oppressed are often silenced, their sufferings trivialized or ignored by those who have the power to make a difference. The plight of the Bangladesh's minority community serves as a stark reminder of the injustices that continue to persist in the shadow of geopolitical struggles. As we conclude this video, let us remember that behind every statistic is a human life, and every act of violence may leave scars that may never heal.